So Ayana, are all your people here? I think so.
Yes. My peeps are here.
All right. So we'll just give it like another minute because I think people are still arriving.
That traffic on the internet.
Yes. Do you want to share screen? Are you going to plan on doing that?
Yeah, I'm going to share screen.
You should be able to do that without me, so.
Yeah, I've got the button.
Okay, good. Okay, welcome to CoLAverse for February. We are very pleased today to welcome one of our own. Professor Ayana Gaines is here with three of her students who are going to present to us today, who were part of the pilot of the honors program, a course that we ran this semester, which ended last night, which went by the title, This is America, Racism and Pop Culture. And so we're going to hear from her and three of the students who did final presentations for that course as a way of kind of being introduced to the honors program and particularly the material that was included in this particular course. I have to remind everyone that you are being recorded, and so your face and your voice will possibly appear if you choose to share your voice and your face. They will appear in a public forum posted publicly. So if you don't want to do that, then don't speak. Okay, so I have the pleasure of introducing our DEI librarian, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion librarian, Ayana Gaines, who is also an assistant professor. And she's going to take it away, I think, and talk a little bit about the background of the course. I'm going to pop in at the end and talk about the honors program a little bit at the end of the hour. But I'm going to have her describe the course and give us a little taste, I think, of the course and what was involved in her development of it. And then we're going to hear from the students. So without further ado, Ayana.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm really psyched to talk about this class because I had a great time teaching it with our students. They were awesome. So basically, when Linda came to me and said, if you could teach a class on any topic, what would it be? The first thing that came to mind was, how about racism and popular culture? And she said, that sounds fabulous. And I was like, ooh. And the first thing that came to mind was the video, This is America, which is a music video, a song and music video done by Childish Gambino, AKA Donald Glover. It's an amazing video. Hopefully everyone got a chance to view it at least once, maybe even twice, like I asked. And this video to me sort of exemplified a lot of what people can do with music and with video. But it also exemplified a lot of what goes on with the symbolism that you can use in videos. And it sort of started me thinking about how would I construct this class. So I spent a lot of last semester thinking about, okay, 7 weeks, race and popular culture, racism and popular culture, what can you possibly cover? So in developing this class, I started thinking about, well, you've got to define your terms, obviously. We've got to define things like racism. We've got to talk about whether or not reverse racism is a thing. We've got to talk about things like appropriation versus appreciation. We have to talk about, we have to, in some instances, go back in time, talk about the history of things, because even though I wanted to focus on 21st century popular culture, the history of racism in the United States is very old, dating back to, if you want to really think about it, to colonialism, when we had people coming over from other countries to the North America and saying, hey, this land looks great, those people don't. So a lot of it deals with the history of racism and how it plays out in popular culture. One of the issues I wanted students to think about was, does popular culture sort of cause racism, or does the racism just come out in our popular culture? Which way does it go? Is it the egg, or is it the chicken, or is it both? Are we seeing where the popular culture is just showing what racism exists, but then people like, you know, impressionable young 12-year-olds are seeing TikTok videos like What's My Form and saying, oh, that's cool and popular, and then doing What's My Form videos, which are inherently racist. So that was a lot of the things that I wanted the students to talk about. Are there any questions so far? Okay, so given that little bit of an overview, I want to go ahead and pull up my PowerPoint. Don't be scared by the number of tabs that I have open. I've been scolded by a student by the number of tabs that I have open. It's just the way my brain processes things. I'm very visual. So let me get this party started. So this was a 7-week course. And as I said, we started with, you know, defining terminology. We talked about things like tropes, which are essentially things like sassy Black woman or magical Negro, basically themes that come out in our stories that are, everyone sort of knows what they are when they see them, because they appear so frequently. We sort of know the story, we know the course that that character is going to play because we've seen them so often. Talked about motifs, story motifs, for example. We talked about Orientalism, where the East, the Orient, is all of a sudden seen as this great mystical place that must be conquered or at least taken care of by the West, because the East is looked at through a Western perspective. We talked about blackface, the history of blackface. We talked about minstrel shows and Jim Crow, not Jim Crow laws, but the actual character Jim Crow. We then spent subsequent weeks looking at different areas of popular culture, such as digital and internet culture. We looked at film and television, and we looked at music. If I had the whole semester, we could have gone into comic books. We could have gone so much more deeply into film and television than we did. There were so many more areas that we could have explored, but 7 weeks means that you have to be sort of short and focused. The topic at hand that I'm going to talk about today is music. We did a discussion of music and racism in music, and then we analyzed the song and video "This Is America" by Childish Gambino. So a little bit about the roots of modern music, because this isn't a musicology class. So 20th century music and 21st century music have their roots in the music from slaves. So our modern music has roots going back to the 1500s, 1600s, and 1700s, and 1800s. The Africans who were brought over from Africa to North America to work were not allowed to keep their names. They weren't allowed to keep their religion. They weren't allowed to keep their families. So what they did is that they developed music that they could keep for themselves. That involves spirituals, it involved work calls, it involved chants. And that music was heard by the owners, heard by the white owners. And that music became the roots of what we now know as modern music. Um, Blues music developed out of that music, and the blues influences everything from jazz to rock, R&B to country. Um, Jazz is, of course, very influential in a lot of areas. And what's interesting about jazz is that you had a lot of people saying it was sinful, that it was immoral, but really the people that were against jazz were against it because of racism. Now, jazz's influence we see heavily in the development of rock and roll, or rock and or roll, if you'd like to call it that. Now, the thing with Black music and white music is that there's a very complex relationship going on there. Musicians from the 50s and the 60s, such as the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, the British Invasion, they totally loved the musicians like Little Richard and Bo Diddley. They influenced them heavily. And these guys loved playing their music. They would do covers. They would do Long Tall Sally during gigs. They would play Twist and Shout. And their fans loved it. And they recognized and gave credit to the Black musicians who gave them this music. Little Richard appreciated this. He loved the fact that white artists were playing Black music because it presented more opportunities for Black artists to play and record, although they still made less money than the white artists. However, the hip hop group Public Enemy stated in their song Fight the Power that Elvis was a hero to most, but he never meant shit to me. So there is a contentious sort of relationship going on there. That's while some Black musicians appreciated white musicians, there's still this idea that they were stealing Black culture and using it for themselves and not appreciating it. Elvis himself was actually friends with Little Richard. Other things we see going on in music is Orientalism in popular music. That actually dates back to the 19th century, where you have songs about the Orient coming out in classical music. There's a song from the 80s called Turning Japanese by the Vapors that it featured something called the Oriental Riff, which is da 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 da. Oh no, sorry, that's the Arabian riff. My bad. You get all these riffs in your head sometimes. So the Arabian riff is that the Oriental riff is da 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 da, which you've heard in like Kung Fu Fighting. It plays out in Turning Japanese. And these riffs are sort of like shorthand for, hey, our music is about the East. Our music is nice and funky and mystical and talking about the amazing Orient. So it's very interesting to see how musicians would sort of try to make their music a lot more exotic using Orientalism. Now, you can't talk about the history of music without talking about the N-word. The N-word's been around since at least the 1500s in its current usage. It comes from the Spanish word for Black. But in the 1800s, the early to mid 1800s, it was used with some affection. But by the 1900s, the term was just wholly derogatory, especially when used by people who were not Black. Blacks have been trying to reclaim the term, using it to refer to each other casually and in music, but they changed the spelling and therefore the pronunciation, changing the ER at the end to an A. So it would be like, what's up? Used in that context, for example. However, it cannot be used by other races. There was an instance where the hip hop artist Kendrick Lamar was performing on stage at a concert, and he had some audience members up on the stage with him, and he was singing, and he sang the N-word, and one audience member sang it along with him, a white woman, and he stopped the concert and he said, wait, what are you doing? You can't sing that song with me. You cannot. And she tried saying, but it's in the song, you sing it. And she disobeyed the rule that said that that, you know, Ta-Nehisi Coates basically suggests, which is that it is never appropriate for non-Black people to sing the N-word along with their favorite rapper or hip-hop artist. So she was kicked off stage. So the N-word is big in music. It's been there since the song Old Susanna, believe it or not, which has a lyric talking about 500 Black people dying in a commercial accident. What that's doing in the song, Oh, Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me, is anyone's guess. But since 1932, it's been used a lot by non-Black musicians such as Elvis Costello. John Lennon and Yoko Ono used it in their song, Woman is the N-word of the World. Patti Smith used it, and it's used by the Dead Kennedys. It's the key word in the name of the rap artists NWA. And it's become the most used swear word in rap and hip hop since the 2010s. So, are there any questions so far? This is the quick and dirty version of Musicology 101. So, let's talk about This Is America, the video that you watched and the article you read, and then the discussion question that we have in our minds. So, it was released in 2018. 2018 was not necessarily what you would call a calm, peaceful year. The lyrics address things such as systemic racism and discrimination, pervasive gun violence, mass shootings, and the video goes along with that. On the left here on the screen, we see Jim Crow himself, who was portrayed by a white actor in blackface. That pose right there is one of the poses that Donald Glover assumes in the video, just as he raises his gun, lowers it, and shoots the guitar player. That's not coincidence at all. Now, you'll also notice in this shot here on the right, we've got Mr. Childish Gambino himself, Donald Glover, wearing no shirt and wearing pants with buttons in them. It's been observed by people that the pants resembles the pants that were worn during the Civil War era. Now, some have said that the reason that he's not wearing a shirt is because he wants to resemble the everyday man, not superimpose any sort of fashion. I see it as something different. I see the fact that this is the way that a slave would have been dressed if he were up on a block or if he were about to be whipped. I think this is the way a slave would be dressed. So, a few things that I want to point out just right off the bat. Now, the video itself features a mostly Black cast, except for at the end. And it's very important to stay till the end. Marvel movies have taught us this. Now, throughout the entire video, Gambino's stance resembles those of the character Jim Crow. Again, not coincidence. Now, there are a lot of different dance moves that go on in this because it's a video, you gotta have dance. And with the dance, what you see is that there's a lot of different dance moves that are coming from different parts of Africa, which is, on one hand, really interesting from an anthropological perspective, but also very deliberate. So, the article I had you read was from The Complex, and what I really like is this particular quote. As you peel back the layers, you get a beautifully dark portrait of the ultra-violence and rage running through America, and most importantly, residing in the minds of Black Americans trying to survive this insanity. So, discussion. We watched the video twice. Once, we watched the video paying attention to Donald Glover's face and body movements. The second time we watched what's going on behind him. Is there a contrast? And if so, what does this contrast mean? So, what does this contrast mean? What did you all see watching this video?
Uh-oh. Okay. I watched this video so many times, like when it came out, I didn't rewatch it in preparation for this, so it's been a minute. But since nobody's saying anything, I'll jump in and say I seem to recall that, it's sort of like, I don't know. I've been a Childish Gambino fan for a long time, and his stuff has changed a lot, right? And this video really stood out when it came out for a lot of reasons. There was something almost like, and I mean, he's a really good storyteller. He's gotten really, really good at that. Like, it almost struck me like a Greek chorus sort of thing, where there was like a tableau sort of thing going on in the background, right? Like a drama was being enacted, or pieces of drama were being enacted behind him while he was doing his thing as sort of the narrator running through it. But I mean, there's so many different, I can't speak more specifically than that, I guess.
But yeah, Greek chorus is a great way to sort of describe it. He's got the school kids behind him doing the dances as he's dancing in front of them. Some instances he's smiling, but in other instances his face is saying something entirely different. Any other observations?
I'm like Solomon. I didn't rewatch it, but I watched it multiple times when it came out, and I just remember being really, really uncomfortable by it. Even though I thought it was a great piece of art, it was hard to watch, and it still is hard to watch, actually, and it's actually hard to listen to too.
Yeah. When he says, that is Selly, that a tool, talks about the cell phone that the kids are using. Cell phones are tools now. We're using them to capture police violence. They're not just for looking at TikTok anymore.
Yeah. I don't watch TikTok too much, but anyways.
And if he of course participates in the violence, because he picks up the AK-47 at one point during the video and mows down the church choir, and steps in and out of the scenes with the bodies in the parking garage, and kind of reenacts out when he's running away from the pursuers, when it's clearly a kind of runaway slave vignette. And so, I mean, he interacts with the backgrounds and the violence in the backgrounds in all sorts of interesting ways, because sometimes he's the victim and sometimes he's the perpetrator, and he like comes in and out of it kind of seamlessly, which is, I think, it heightens it makes it more disturbing, because it unnerves you, it displaces you, you're not sure who he is or what he's representing at any given time, and I think that's the point.
I really like, Ayana, that you put up the picture you started your PowerPoint with the dance move, and I would not have caught on to that. Now that I reflect on the video, I mean, I like you say, it is very deliberate. I think the dance move, that position, and kind of giving a context where this all began, bringing that to the video. That was an interesting. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of absorbing to really get this video.
Selly and Tool is interesting too. Like, I mean, because Tool, like growing up with like 90s East Coast hip hop, Tool was always, that was like a biscuit, that was a gat, it was a gun, right? Like, so like a cell phone as a weapon, like in both ways. Like there's a deep ambivalence in this, in the whole, like throughout, right? Like both sides of shit, like reflected inward and outward. So like a cell phone can be a gun, like in a positive way, in that it can be a defensive like weapon, but it can also be something you turn on yourself.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention one of the lyrics at the end of the song, when Childish Gambino is getting chased by the mob of white people at the end, where it says, "You just a big dog. I killed him in the backyard. No, probably ain't life to a dog for a big dog." I think that lyric, he threw that in there just to say that even though he's a celebrity and a person of his status, that he's still kind of, trapped in the same place that all Black people are trapped in. So, you kenneled a big dog in a backyard, and, that's not life to a big dog, but, he's basically saying, I'm still in this too, even being the person that I am.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. And then one thing that always captures me when I watch this video is his face, watching Donald Glover's face, because he's such a great actor. And to me, it's almost like he's fighting against something, like he'll smile sometimes, but it's more of this grimace of like, I'm being made to smile. And then it's this very hardcore sort of like, why am I being made to do this? Why am I being made to dance? Why am I dancing through this utter chaos? And I think that's important to point out, that it's almost one of the things he comments on in this video is the fact that we've got a Black man dancing for entertainment for other people in the midst of this chaos, this, people being shot, cars, left abandoned. There's so much going on, and here he is, he's dancing.
Ayanna, I'm glad you said that, because that was something I thought of as a stereotype for African Americans, is that we will sing through it, we'll dance through it, and we'll smile, because you see the background dancers, the ones that are dressed in the school clothes, they're smiling. I mean, they have this, what I call the plantation slave smile. Some of them have that smile on their face because, as you stated, let's just dance through it, and that's a stereotype.
I wanted to share, the first time I watched it, I couldn't make any sense of it, and I just wanted to cry. And this is, when it came out, and I've been very conservative watching this video. I can't, handle it emotionally to see many times, but I did watch it. I did my homework, Ayanna, watched it twice today. and I thought about the background, and I realized that it's a revolving, it's basically a merry-go-round. And so a lot of the elements, the tropes repeat. So you have the guitar player shows up later in the video again. And then those kids that dance with him then show up with the cell phones, right? Perched up on and so the eternal return of it, the sort of the perpetual motion and repetitiveness of it implicates the viewer. In fact, if you think of the camera, what's the camera's viewpoint? Who are we, where are we positioned in this entire picture? And the answer is right in the middle of it, because as the camera revolves, we're basically constantly occupying space that would just on the other side and just behind him a moment ago. So it's actually very, very, in a very sly way, it implicates the viewer. And so when he hands off the gun and it's off camera, we are off camera also. So it's almost like the gun is being handed off to us.
Great observation.
And Ayanna, you and I talked about this the other day, but I just wanted to mention that I taught this video to a class at Pasadena City College when I was teaching Claudia Rankin's Citizen. And we looked at this video, I don't know when it first maybe came out, a couple years ago. And one of my students, who was probably slightly older, 25-year-old Black man, really objected to the idea of me showing the video to the class, because his objection was based on the fact that it was traumatic. It was a trauma response for him, and that no matter what the educational benefits might have been for the class, that it was too much and that I should not have shown it. And we had a very interesting conversation based on that. And so I just sort of toss that out there and offer that as another kind of aspect of bringing this into the educational setting.
Yeah, it's interesting because art, you know, as I see it, it's there to either ask or answer questions. It's meant to provoke, or it's meant to soothe. It's art as a medium can just go so many different ways. What I've really enjoyed about this conversation so far is everything, but also this idea that the construction of that video is meticulously intentional. Yeah, and so many messages can either be over somebody's head or straight to their heart. So just the multiplicity of what we're being exposed to there.
I feel like even though the video is traumatic and it may trigger some people, you know, it would probably be nice to give a warning that, you know, next class or we are going to watch the video to This Is America. But it's important to discuss it, and it's important for people to see, because it brings up the conversation of, you know, what's going on and how do we fix it and how does it make you feel? So, you know, while I understand why that would be triggering to some Black people, it's very important that it's talked about. I mean, because, you know, in the Black community, we do deal with a lot of things, but I feel like it shouldn't just be ignored in the classroom, or it shouldn't just be like, okay, well, let's not upset anybody, or let's keep it safe and not talk about it. Like, some things, even if it makes you uncomfortable, they need to be talked about.
One thing I did on my syllabus was put a trigger warning for content, because I thought that was important. I felt that there were things that would come up that it was really, but that we needed to discuss. I also had in my Moodle board two different boards, one for discussing things if it brought up emotions that I wanted people to work through, if they couldn't talk about it, but to at least write it out. And then another board that was just sort of like a social board. And I checked them all the time to make sure that everyone was doing okay. And I always did a check-in to make sure that we were doing okay. But I wanted to make sure, most of all, that my students were okay with what we were doing.
You know, when I first saw this video during Saturday Night Live, I had no idea that the movement meant something. I just thought they were just dancing. And after going through this exercise of doing the assignment and watching it twice and do the reading, I really, you know, I learned a lot, because now I understand that all the movements mean something. You know, it's very interesting. I had no idea.
It's, as Carla said, everything is so deliberate in this video. People, you know, the last scene where he's running, some people have even likened it to the coming out of the, have you seen the movie Get Out? Where he's in the darkness, or
The sunken place.
The sunken place. And it's almost like Donald Glover's trying to escape the sunken place.
I hesitate to throw this in here, but like, I've been a big fan of Donald Glover forever for like various reasons. Like, we grew up in the same place and we grew up in the same religion too. Like, and we both got out of the religion that we were in, that we grew up in. Like, no shade to anybody or whatever, but like, it's been very interesting, like thinking back on my childhood in that religion. Like, you know, the religion in which we grew up, I'll keep it like that, you know, presented this, and continues to present, I would contend, a sort of facade of inclusion, in that everybody's sort of in there together. And definitely growing up down south, you know, like, I went to church, and, you know, there were Black people there, Mexican people there, and white people there, you know, it was all together. But it was like this facade of inclusion, you know what I mean? And it's such an insular community, you know, they do shunning and stuff like this and everything too, you know, and like, when you've got your family there, there's this threat being held over your head. And I feel like the religious aspect gets tied into some of that as well, you know, this sort of escaping sort of thing. Anyway, I'm going to be quiet now.
Oh, Solomon. Does anyone else have any thing they'd like to add to the conversation?
I have a question for everyone. Why do you guys think SZA, who is such a prominent artist and appears in this video, is never fully shown and never fully showcased by the camera? It's I spotted her the very first time because she has a very regal presence, but she's in the background. Why do you think that is?
I actually wondered that too, and was like watching the video trying to figure it out. And the only thing that I could kind of come up with is that when SZA finally came out on the scene, she was just like this powerful, beautiful Black woman with long, natural Afro hair that everyone loved, and that, you know, everyone had a crush on SZA and still does. So I feel like her representation in that was, okay, a natural, beautiful Black woman. And she was the only Black woman that was kind of like showcased and had a cameo in the video besides the Black schoolgirls that were dancing behind Donald Glover. So I feel like she was kind of just like that regal, strong Black woman that they feel every Black man has, or that every Black community has. There's always, you know, that one strong, beautiful Black woman that is there with the Black man throughout all the chaos.
I mean, we also end up with this chorus, right, of Black man, get your money, you know what I mean? Like, there's support going on there, right? Like, it takes many forms.
Any other comments?
I have a question, which is not as deep as Rawson's question, but I've only seen Donald Glover in Community, and then the This Is America video, which are, you know, so different, right? It's Community is very lighthearted and funny and whatever, but I've always been curious about Atlanta. What's the Atlanta show like? Is it, it's not a comedy, right? Is it?
It has some comedic things in it. I feel like it's a really good show. I recommend it. It has some comedic moments, but it also has some very serious moments. They have some episodes that cover like really heavy topics, and then they have some episodes that are just really lighthearted and they're funny. And then he has a couple of episodes where there's like a hidden meaning to it, or it's something that you'll have to rewatch again to kind of like dive in deeper to what the meaning was. But it's a mixture, but I highly recommend it. They're actually doing a new season, I believe, this year. They were supposed to do it last year, but unfortunately Donald Glover lost his father. So he pushed it back to this year. So there should be, I believe, a third season coming out soon.
Okay, thanks. Because it, you know, like the This Is America video seemed like such a, I don't know, huge leap, but I think that Atlanta was probably cushioned that transition.
It's one of the best shows of the last 10 years, I think, writing wise. Like, it's wild.
I'll have to check it out.
He also makes a really mean young Lando Calrissian.
Yeah, my husband and I have been watching Disney movies, and he was in some Disney movies, recent ones that we've seen, which is, I don't know, funny because those are even more lighthearted and silly.
Okay, well, we've got about 20 minutes left, and I want to give my awesome students an opportunity to talk. So I told them I would go alphabetically by first name. So I'd like to go ahead and start with Elle. She is a sophomore in
filmmaking.
Filmmaking, that's right. I wrote it down and everything.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. Let's see if it goes. Can you guys see? All good? Okay, the question is now, can we still see? Okay, awesome. So just a little bit about me. My name is Marieli Tavares. I'm a Hispanic Latina, but I go by Elle because it's a little easier to pronounce. So today I want to talk about the rise of Latin music in America. And when I say rise, I mean from like 2017 up, because I get this question, hasn't Latin music been around forever? I know you're thinking, but I listened to Hips Don't Lie in the early 2000s. I can get with Shakira and J-Lo and Daddy Yankee. Latin music has been around forever. I'm not talking about that kind of Latin music. I'm talking about this. Despacito featuring Justin Bieber, Billie Eilish, and Drake Bell. So it occurred to me there's a lot of non-Hispanic artists or non-Latino artists or non-Spanish speaking artists featuring on a lot of Spanish songs or releasing Spanish albums. So I started thinking, why is everyone doing this? When I was younger, Spanish was kind of seen as a little lame. You know, I even tried to teach my Spanish only speaking abuelita how to speak English because I didn't want to speak Spanish in public. So if I knew that before, that it was going to become such a trend, it would have saved me a lot of work. So naturally, I Googled it. So what gives? Why does everyone sing in Spanish now? And naturally, I Googled it. And here's what I found out. Hispanic and Latinx makes up the largest ethnic minority in America, and Latin music is the 5th most popular genre in America. Also, according to the Nicholson's report, Hispanic Americans spend $135 a year in music, which is 30% more than the average American. So it makes sense. It's a pretty good business deal to want to speak in Spanish. So what's the problem? The problem is when we have people that abuse and appropriate our language and our culture, like Mr. Justin Bieber. So I'm not sure if the video will play, but this is a screen cap of it. And basically it's a video from Entertainment Tonight showing Justin Bieber at the 1-0 Club in New York City singing Despacito, except when it came to the Spanish verse that he originally sang, he replaces all the words with blah, blah, blah. And this is a verse that got him $3.2 million and 1 billion streams on YouTube. So something I would like to highlight is the movement of This is America. This is America, speak English. This is America, we don't want immigrants. So these are all news articles about native Spanish speakers or immigrants being told this is America. So you would expect that Americans would have this same energy toward the Biebs when he came out with this song. Instead, these are some of the news articles that came out when Justin Bieber released his Spanish-speaking music. Justin Bieber crushes it on Spanish remix of Despacito. Justin Bieber singing in Spanish is a highly sexual experience. So these are two very, very different reactions. And so now's the time that we have to think about, why is this our America? Why do we allow the Spanish language to be used as exotic monetary gain? You know, why is it when native Spanish speakers speak Spanish in public, we're told, go back to your country. We're told, we don't want you here. This is America, speak English. But when an attractive white man does it, suddenly we reward him with $3.2 million and 1 billion views on YouTube. So the last thing I would like to say is Spanish is not here to be your ticket to exotic monetary gain. It's not. Hispanic people or Latinx people are not here to be your islander friend, to be the person that makes you feel cool and makes you feel exotic. So the next time your favorite non-Spanish speaker or non-Hispanic Latinx artist puts out a Spanish song, think about whether they're paying homage to our culture and our language or simply using us for a paycheck. Thank you so much for your time.
Great job. Awesome. That was fabulous.
Thank you.
Linda, should we take questions now or let everyone present first and then go back and take questions?
I think we can take some questions now just because
Okay.
people's memories are fresh.
That's what I was thinking.
I've
So,
always thought that Justin Bieber is a total dweeb, so now you've just given me more fuel. Excellent, Elle. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's just so damn important.
I just think, you know, if we're giving out money for speaking Spanish, you know, I'm waiting for my check.
I like that you said, are they paying homage? Or are they trying to cash in? And because I think there is, I think it's great when you do have a cross-pollination of these cultural ideas. And you know, I grew up at a time when you had Jimi Hendrix doing a very white form of rock and roll, and then you had Grand Funk doing a very, well, doing a more, you know, black style of rock, but Grand Funk being an all white band. And so that was more, I thought of looking at as homages and cross-pollination, as I say, and rather than trying to cash in. Another thing that, like a group like the Texas Tornadoes from Texas that had Mexicans and Americans in the band, Mexican Americans and you know, Latinos and white guys doing a very cross-pollinated type of music, and I thought that was just a great thing. But I do see a real issue here.
Yeah, of course.
Trying to cash in.
Yeah, I personally think that a lot of times when artists just release songs in Spanish, it is for marketing, because how many of these artists, if they really want to pay homage to the Latin community and to the Hispanic community, what are they doing in actions? How much have they donated to immigrancy? How much have they campaigned for these things? You know, I'm born to two lovely mixed parents, and one of them is an immigrant from Dominican Republic. He came here when he was 18. He's 43 and still unable to become a full US citizen because that's how difficult our immigrancy system is. And that's how hard it is to become a citizen in America. So if artists really want to pay homage to the Spanish community, campaign for us. Show how well we can abolish this system and create a new one that caters to immigrants and that caters to the Hispanic and Latinx community and caters to people of color of all languages and all colors.
Hi, Elle. Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, I can.
So
Hi.
I thought that was a really interesting presentation. I'm myself born and raised in Peru, in Latin America. And I mean, I also, you know, the way you started also kind of seemed interesting to me because you spoke about Shakira and J-Lo, which are like possibly like the most non-Hispanic that are out there, that also saw themselves to, you know, to a system that deviated their music from their real roots.
Yeah.
In order to just make money and profit, right? And they changed their looks. I mean, when I was a child, you know, Shakira's songs were so different from Hips Don't Lie. You know, like, that would be an advice of me, that you listen to very early Shakira songs when her hair was black and very long and she just sat down in a chair with her guitar, you know, like a very pure and simple way of representing her music and of reaching to her community, which at the turn of the 2000s just completely changed, right? And so I personally, for a long time, kind of deviated away from Latin American music because I felt that a lot of it didn't actually represent real Latino cultures, but they were just sexualized messages in where we are objects, you know, sexual objects, and then the machismo culture is very predominant in over them. And it wasn't until I met my husband, who is from Chile and listens to rap and to other kind of alternatives to Hispanic music, that I sort of fell back in love with it. Even Spanish reggae, which is amazing. You know, they have some lyrics that talk about indigenous resistance, about, you know, love between a man and a woman without the need of sexual objectification or material acquaintances. So since you're interested in this topic, I would highly suggest that you do some more research as well on Hispanic music in general, and perhaps try to focus not so much on the mainstream side of Latin American music as of right now, because it's just being completely sold off, you know, to the markets and to the same message. That same thing with, I would say the same thing happens a lot of times with rap and hip hop, you know, that is from the African American community. A lot of the lyrics I didn't used to like it either, because a lot of those lyrics just talked about women in a demeaning way, and, you know, it's just about a specific type of rhetoric that was not conducive to a raising consciousness to those who are listening to it. And in that sense, I think, you know, art and music expression can have a very positive effect when trying to reconcile relationships, you know, between these different races, between different genders, between different times and countries. So, but that was a great presentation.
Thank you so much. I chose to talk about Shakira and J-Lo because they've kind of become like the poster children, I guess, of Hispanic people and Latinos in the media.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of sad what you're talking about, how her style deviates. And it's because so many people, they're like, we want your looks, we want your exotic features, but it's also not, we can't handle that. So we have to change you.
Exactly. And as Rada is saying right now, Shakira, yeah, she's half Arab.
Yeah.
So she's born in Colombia, but she's half Arab. And that's why her hair is so strikingly Black too. And, you know, and she has this very specific look of this mix of, I think that isn't the mom, I'm not sure if the mom is, I think the mom is Colombian and the dad is Arab. But as you're saying, you know, the moment that she released Hips Don't Lie, I mean, even before that, I think it was with the song previous to that, then her hair went all red, but for a very, very short amount of time. And then it was all blonde, right? And she's kept the bleach blonde hair for 20 years now. So totally different from her roots and from her origins. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, so next we have Miss Paisley Anderson. Peace. She is a sophomore in the architecture department.
Yes. Okay. I'm trying to share my screen. 1 second. Okay. And thumbs up so I know that you guys can see my screen. Awesome. So my presentation was about our favorite culture vulture of the 2000s, Gwen Stefani. Yes, you read that right. Gwen Stefani is a culture vulture. The reason I say this is because she was born in Fullerton, in California in 1969. She began her solo career in 2004, separating from her bandmates, No Doubt, with her #1 hit, What You Waiting For? And this video in particular was the start of her trendy debauchery, even though from some of her music videos and moments with her band, No Doubt, they got a lot of backlash for certain videos and images that they did and portrayed. Her most popular songs after she went solo were What You Waiting For, Holla Back Girl, which is the video in question that I'm going to be discussing, Rich Girl, and Cool. Does the video have elements of racism? If so, what are they? So again, we're talking about the video Holla Back Girl. If you haven't seen it before, I definitely would check it out. And just to let you guys know, I am a huge fan of Gwen Stefani and I love Gwen Stefani, but she needs to be called out on her crap. So her first instance of appropriation is her Harajuku Dancers, who are Japanese American women. They are named after her fashion line, LAMP. It's an acronym for Love, Angel, Music, and Baby. So Gwen claims to be obsessed with Japanese culture and that Harajuku style is native to Japan. You can see in these photos that I have on my slide that these Japanese American girls have afros, cornrows, scarves that are usually donned by gang members, in baggy clothing. When you Google Harajuku from Japan, Harajuku is actually a district in Japan, and the Harajuku style is completely different from what you're seeing here. They dress up in really vibrant clothing and really vibrant styles that kind of look like they're straight out of an anime. It's very fantasy-like, it's very magical-like, and none of this that you see here is really Harajuku. Gwen claims that she's just showing appreciation. She hasn't appropriated anything in anything that she's done, but you can see here that her Harajuku girls are appropriating Black culture. Seriously, Gwen, you have a track record. From her video Luxurious, she actually appropriated Chola culture. She's claimed to be mesmerized by Chola culture, noting in 2017 that the Cholas had a huge influence on her because she was raised in Anaheim. She's also been receiving backlash for culturally appropriating South Asian and Black culture. As you can see in this picture, she's donning a bindi, and she's also donning what is known in the Black community as Bantu knots. Prior to her Harajuku days, she continually adorned bindis, and that is normally worn by South Asian women, and it has cultural and spiritual significance in that culture. It's not something that you just wear as an accessory. Does Holla Back Girl engage in cultural appropriation? Oh boy, does it. Where do I begin? I am not going to show the video here, but you guys can definitely watch it after. And I made a disclaimer that this is my favorite song ever of hers, and that this song taught all the high schoolers how to properly spell bananas during the time that it came out. So never forget that. That's the video. So I asked for a quick quiz question. How many cultures did Gwen appropriate within a span of 3 minutes and 31 seconds? The answer is, I have no clue. I honestly lost count or any variation of that because same. As you can see here, Gwen is kind of rocking the Chola look with the thin eyebrows, the dark eyeliner and red lips, and a beanie with a white beater. She is also seen riding in a lowrider with hydraulics and a custom spray painted decal, which is heavily seen in the Hispanic and Latin community, especially in the 90s and the 80s. From the lowrider vehicle to the Japanese girls donning baggy clothes, afros, and cornrows, that can be seen in the video, and I'm pretty sure that there's a lot more. Miss Stefani has been called out on her appropriation multiple times. Her and her band, no doubt, actually received a lot of backlash and had to remove one of their videos from all platforms called Looking Hot because the band members were featured playing cowboys and Indians, where they played as the cowboys and were killing or slaughtering Indians. Do you see or hear any racial tropes, motifs, or stereotypes in the video? What are they? Why are they there? Are they intentional or an indication of bias? So just to start off, holla back is African American vernacular that was used heavily in New York from the rapper Fabulous in his song Youngin' Holla Back. They say it over and over again. And in that song, and for holla back in the Black community, it was heavily used in the 2000s. It was just kind of a way of saying goodbye or call me back later. So if you got off the phone with the phone, you'll tell them, oh, holla back. Why she would be a holla back girl or not a holla back girl, no one really understood it. Everyone was really confused. And you can see in some movies, they actually made jokes about that. Like, what is a holla back girl? No one knows. It's just a catchy song. And I feel like that this was intentional that she used African-American vernacular because Fabulous debuted the word in 2001 with his song, and Gwen released her song Holla Back Girl in 2004. And I believe she used the word because it was catchy and trendy slang. I feel like the intended audience was for people of color. The beat is really catchy and so is the chorus. And the song was produced by Pharrell, who was one of my favorite producers. He is of Asian and African-American descent. and he's very well known within the Black community. I also stated that Gwen had her own sound, but most of her hit songs came from working with Black artists. Most of her songs, not all of them, such as her features on Let Me Blow Your Mind with rapper Eve, Rich Girl, who was also featuring Eve, and that's produced by Dr. Dre, and Sweet Escape, which is produced and sung alongside with Akon, who is also another Black artist. Another thing that stands out to me, but I could also just be reaching on my side or grabbing for straws, the fact in the video that she used a drumline marching band to be featured in her video after the release of Nick Cannon's movie Drumline, which is a staple movie within the Black community. So I was wondering, like, was this intentional? Was this used to grab our attention, or was it just fun to have a marching band and to follow along with the school the school theme that she had going on in her video? So all in all, Gwen continuously denies her appropriation from the start of her band, no doubt, up until now. She says that she hasn't appropriated anything, and she is sticking to her story of she's just admiring cultures and showing appreciation, even though every few years she seems to appreciate the cultures when they're trending, or if it's a trend for her, or if it looks cool for her, and then she switches her obsession and completely forgets about the culture that she was appreciating, which is not appreciation at all. So I would like to end it with, our cultures are not a trend, Gwen, but your music is really cool, so please just own up to your misuse and misrepresentation. And there was also a comment from Asian American comedian Margaret Cho, who said back in 2005, Stefani's take on Harajuku Girls is a minstrel show that promoted the stereotyping of Asian women. She has since then not worked with some of these dancers. She just released a video, I want to say either earlier this year or last year, which she actually brought back 2 of the Harajuku dancers and had them still like donning the Black look in the video. And she pretty much just showed, this is me, this is who I am, don't forget. So it was like, whoa, okay, Gwen, like you really want to stick with this. Thank you.
Is it bad if I call it fabulous? That you did.
Wait.
Did I call what you did was fabulous?
Oh, thank you.
I couldn't resist.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Paisley or comments?
I do, for sure. I really appreciated your presentation for so many reasons. One is I appreciate you acknowledging the ambivalence about this too. You know, like this, when it comes to drumline or HBCU band style music, like Hollaback Girl is such a poor comparison to, you know, standing next to like Homecoming or something. It doesn't look so good, but it is such a good song.
Right, yeah, it's a good song.
And it is a big cheerleading song, and cheerleading culture has been so influenced by Black America. Right? It's so complicated.
Yeah,
but,
it's really complicated.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to talk over you by any means.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Ask you a question though. Because I'm genuinely curious about this as someone who's only lived in Los Angeles for 2.5 years. So she's from Fullerton, I think. She's from somewhere in California, right? Not too far from here. Maybe my favorite thing about Los Angeles is that, like, I lived in New York, you know, for a long time, and like everybody talks about New York as like a melting pot, and it can be, but I don't know. Everything feels very separate in New York to me, or at least it always did to me when I lived there. Like, and what I love about Los Angeles is that it really feels like we're all in the mix here. Like we're in this giant pot, like this huge, sprawling, bizarre city with so many different cultures, and it's really fantastic. And there's so much bleed and overlap, and, you know, between different neighborhoods, things, while folks still maintaining, you know, their distinct identities and things, which is all awesome. But I was wondering about this, like, is it possible for anyone, you know, from any culture to sort of pay homage, right, or to show appreciation for, you know, being in a multiplicity of cultures in a real melting pot, right, in the idea of what America was supposed to be or is supposed to be? You know, is there any way to do that without pulling the Gwen Stefani act, because yeah, we were all cringing when she had the Harajuku girls dancing with her. And I love Harajuku's style. Like I follow blogs from Harajuku, you know what I mean? I love that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
anyway.
So what my take on it kind of was, a lot of people complain, thank you, Pauline. A lot of people complain that in order to show appreciation versus appropriation, don't adopt the style and then have yourself be like the main attraction and then kind of put all the other people in the background. For example, if you guys have ever seen her video for Luxurious, or if you want to watch it after this, she has on the whole Chola look, even though she has no Hispanic or Latin background in her blood. She's wearing the Chola makeup, the clothes and everything, and that's been seen as ghetto or hood or not ladylike in that community. But then she makes it kind of like a costume for her video, makes herself completely blonde. She's the blondest Chola looking person out of the group, and then just kind of puts the Hispanic and Latin women or Hispanic and Latin men behind her in the video as just like props, but she's the main attraction. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to take your style, I'm going to take your culture and just throw you guys in the background, and then everything is about me. That's kind of disrespectful. So if she wanted to, pay homage to that, she should have had actual Cholas and actual people within that culture and have them be the forefront and, just show more appreciation and just have her dress the way that she is, in the way that, she dresses, and not kind of use it as a costume. That's kind of like what we talked about in class, what Katy Perry did, which for her video Dark Horse, she didn't pay any homage to Egyptians, but she decided, let me dress up as an Egyptian woman, even though I have no Egyptian blood in me. Let me take all of the different religions and different things out of there and put it in my video only for entertainment purposes. And it kind of looked ridiculous. So I think that there's a fine line between, okay, let me put these certain elements in my music video to showcase this and bring it a new light so that people don't look at Chola culture, or people don't look at Black culture as ghetto or hood, and kind of like appreciate it by putting those actual people from that community in the video, instead of you saying, I'm just going to steal your entire look and then promote it from my point of view, if that kind of makes sense.
I have a quick call. Well, Paisley, I love your presentation, but this is something that actually goes back also to what Elle was talking about. So I was thinking about Madonna, because her latest album had a song called Medellin, and it's half sung in Spanish, and it's obviously, the rhythms of Colombia, and she has a Colombian artist on the track. But Madonna is also the OG who had a Spanish song, La Isla Bonita, in her very first album, right? So she's a repeat offender. It's interesting though to compare because I'm thinking the history of music, and so I think that Gwen Stefani falls right in between the two Madonna songs, right? Because it's late 90s, early 2000s. But what used to happen was there was a lot of exposure, and the music industry was much more centralized. And you imagine that a bunch of really boring white men made all the money, right? And there's enough of a record of that. And so, still some of the richest people in Hollywood are the people that made the money back then from that kind of stuff. Now, I think what's changed is that there's much more exposure and much more awareness. So then it becomes with every step we make, it becomes more ridiculous to do the things that, Paisley and Elle are calling out. Now, a really fun, strange fact, La Isla Bonita was written for Michael Jackson, not for Madonna. But then in the last minute. So because appropriation or homage, or whatever you want to call it, is a pattern in pop. But the issue is how much, as Paisley was saying, how involved are you in the community? How deep do you go? Last thing I'll quickly say, in Hollaback Girl, there's a moment that really rubs me the wrong way, because it's a reference to a Queen song, Another One Bites the Dust. And the marching band actually makes the melody. It's just a quick snippet. But it always reminds me of, because that's also, you could call it homage, but you could call it theft, right? Because to a lot of the kids coming up at that moment or later, they wouldn't know that reference. And so it's lost the musical history.
Yeah, and the fact that Gwen is a repeat offender since the 90s, it's just like, she just doesn't care. Just like Pauline said, she has no chill. She's just like, I'm just going to keep doing it and no one's going to say anything to me. And that's kind of white privilege, because she knows that I can do it and I can get away with it. And I have been for the last decade and more.
Excellent point.
Can we talk about Eminem? Because I've been thinking about a lot of these same questions.
Oh, yeah.
But he seems to have respect. And I'm not a fan, and I'm not a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm indifferent toward him, but do you think he falls in the same category?
I think he definitely does. And the only reason why some of these artists get away with it in the way that they have for so long is because they're backed up by certain people in the music industry to where no one can tell them anything either. And Ayana actually brought up in one of our classes that, and I didn't even know this, that Eminem used the N-word in one of his songs. And that just like completely blew me away. And I'm just like, who even gave him a pass or gave him the okay to do that? And I'm like, you know, he works with Dr. Dre a lot. And I've noticed a lot with Hollywood and the music industry is that any wrong move, if you tell someone no, or if you tell someone I'm not going to do that, you get blacklisted really fast. And it's like, I think Hollywood and the music industry are full of a bunch of yes men. And so they just gave him that pass, and I don't feel that it's right, and I don't agree with it at all. And I have never been a fan of Eminem, and I don't know. I mean, the music industry is just crazy, and people get away with so much within it.
Well, I've already taken up a lot of time, but I just want to ask about the N-word, because you mentioned Patti Smith and John Lennon, and I love both of those songs. But when I hear them, sometimes I wonder, like, is it okay that I love this song or not? And is it okay for, I mean, I don't know. I think it's art, the way they use the word, but maybe I'm wrong about the way I'm thinking about it.
I'll let you
take this. I can take it. You can take it.
Yes, please tell me I can still like those songs.
I think it's about context. I mean, you know, woman is the N-word of the world. You know, John and Yoko were trying to get at the fact that women, you know, weren't really up on a pedestal, you know, in society. They were really getting at the point that women were treated as poorly as, in their mind, as Black people, as, you know, even slaves to a certain extent. You know, that was the reason they used that word, and also for shock value. So they were really, you know, digging in there really to make that point. It's funny because my older son, when he was younger, was like, you know, I don't like rap music. I don't like hip hop. It's all about cursing and women. And I'm like, let me make you a playlist. So I made him a playlist. And now he likes to school me. Like, Mom, you have to get into lo-fi. And I'm like, okay. And so we'll talk about lo-fi. And we went and saw Anderson Paak
Paak, yeah.
He was so awesome in concert. So where I'm going with this is that it's all about the context of the use and the use of the word. I think, like I said, listen to what, you know, people listen to Kendrick Lamar. Do not sing the N-word. If you are not Black, it is not cool. It will get you in trouble, particularly if you're on stage with Kendrick Lamar. But I think if you pay attention to the context, like the N-word plays out a lot in the storytelling. Like with Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly album. That album is amazing, by the way. But the character, you know, he has all these different characters being played out in the album. And he's talking about, like, you know, his life. He's talking about life in the street. He's talking about the temptations of Lucifer. And so the N-word comes up because those are the contexts in which he heard it. And then when he's talking to friends, but then also it's used harshly as an insult. So if you remember the context of the word, it makes a lot more sense. As opposed to just, hey, guess what? I'm going to be a rap artist and I'm going to use the N-word because I can. You know, in some instances, that's maybe why some kids get into rap and hip hop, because they think it gives them the license to use the N-word. So, I mean, you could do a whole day's lecture on the N-word, honestly, but you're okay. You're fine.
Okay, good. Well, my other observation is a lot of, from both Elle and Paisley, some of the things you're talking about are the visuals. And before the 80s, I mean, I know there were still televised performances and all that, but music videos probably really changed how we see all of these artists and pick up on these things that you both are talking about. So I think that's interesting too, because when Marty was mentioning those other artists, I feel like there are artists who respect each other's art and want to share in that. But a lot of the things that you two are talking about seem to have more to do with the visuals, although definitely also the beats and the music too.
Yeah, I'd like to come back in on that one, because I really like both these presentations, and I don't know enough about Eminem, so I'm kind of curious. It's not as if, I don't believe you're saying that a white artist shouldn't do rap or a white artist shouldn't do hip hop, or you know, I mean, we're not saying Jerry Mulligan shouldn't have played jazz, for instance. I don't believe we're saying that, because you'd be missing out on some wonderful music. But I do certainly agree that, you know, Eminem should not be using the N-word and all of that. When I hear about that, but I do need a little more clarification. And the visual, yes, I do. I see that completely. The thing that Paisley talking about with the Hollaback Girl video and all of that. The appropriation for profit, I guess we could call it.
Yeah, to me it seems like it's mostly about money, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Like, if you're benefiting from this other culture in a profitable way and not giving credit, and then also not sharing the wealth, that's the main problem. But it's not about loving the artistry of another culture and wanting to share in that.
Yeah, there is a big difference between David Bowie going on Soul Train and playing, which he did in the 70s, because he got a lot of respect, versus someone like Gwen Stefani or Katy Perry saying, oh my God, I'm going to do a video. It's going to be totally awesome. And doing something utterly out of the range just because they think it'll look good, or it'll sell, or they'll get 1 billion hits on YouTube. There's a big difference. Respect, I think, is key. Respect for your fellow musicians, respect for your fans, and just doing it because you think you're going to get, you know, like, for example, Katy Perry, and we'll talk about Katy Perry later, definitely. She's another culture vulture. She's, you know, one of those who's done this a lot as well. She's, you know, taken cultures just because they look pretty, not because there's any particular attachment of the culture to a song. Whereas David Bowie being on Soul Train made sense. So a lot of it is thinking about it in those contexts as well.
I have a question. I'm trying to understand the concepts and everything. How does David Bowie singing the song China Girl, how is that classified?
Oh, that's appropriation. He used the Asian riff, and basically it was all about exotifying an Asian woman. And if you listen to the lyrics, it's all about, oh, she's, you know, I mean, I love the song. I love David Bowie. I really do love Bowie, but the song has always been slightly problematic for me because of it.
Can we
video.
say though?
I'm trying to understand.
Sorry.
I'm trying to understand whether that offended the culture, or I understand the concept of appropriation, but I'm just trying to understand, for example, how singing that song, I thought it was kind of, in a way, helping the culture. I don't know, but you know, just singing about, I love China, you know, just, I love the song itself. I love David Bowie's music, but I'm just trying to understand more specifically how that works.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I wanted to I mean, something to what Arthur is saying, but also what Bryda asked. I think, you know, because Patti Smith and also David Bowie and John Lennon for sure are very close to my heart. But, you know, I think that the measure of these particular instances is this exclusively made for profit, first of all? And are these insensible people across the longitude of their careers? And you would imagine that someone like David Bowie, if he was alive today, would never make that song. So yes, you could call it youthful indiscretion. And I don't want to give him a free pass. He's an idiot to have made it back then. But you see the entire career. I'm the only person that I've ever idolized was David Bowie. And I know every album by heart and everything. And my favorite thing about him is not the music or the artistry, it's the fact that he promoted other people's careers. So Luther Vandross was first came on the scene as a backup singer for David Bowie. But this is one out of 1,000 examples. And so again, across the span of an entire artistic lifetime, you allow yourself to, you know, one or two indiscretions. I'm sure that Patti Smith, she's basically sainted now. She's gotten the National Book Award. She's, and so at this point, she is, you know, a saintly presence. If she looks back, she'll be like, yeah, I'd rather not, you know, play that song or write another song or use the N-word ever again, right? And so, yeah, it was a much more chaotic time. And if you're a true artist, you explored everything. And of course, you got into dangerous situations. That's my problem with Katy Perry and all of the rest of them. There's nothing dangerous about this. It's lame.
I do feel like some of this surely has to do with some like common sense too. And I want to shut up after this. Like the students haven't talked in enough time. It's all teachers talking about David Bowie at this point, as much as I love David Bowie. But anyway, like I feel like some of this is common sense. Like I've been a lifelong hip hop fan. I grew up listening to hip hop, but I was always white. You know what I mean? Like, so I never said the N-word. Like I always knew where it came in the lyrics, and I just shut my mouth when that happened, you know. And I'm not trying to stroke myself like I'm some great person for this. It just seems obvious. I've been a goth for a long time, you know, and there's this wonderful movement in LA, the Cholo goth movement. You know, you go to these club nights and it's wonderful. It's filled with like Chicanas like Chicanics folks like dressed up in special goth ways that normal, you know, or ways that, you know, the white goths I grew up with like don't dress, and it's fantastic, right? But I'm not gonna like take that outfit, like it looks awesome on them, but like what am I gonna look like trying to dress up like a Chicano goth? Like what kind of ridiculous, you know what I mean? It makes no sense. I feel like some of this just, you can love something like, and you don't have to always pick the flower, right? You can smell the flower.
So I just wanted to say one thing here. I think that the common element, and I think what you had said originally, Paisley, or one of the things that you said was this notion of white privilege. There is no self-reference or self-criticality with a privileged culture taking on a culture that they think they can. And I think that that really is the key element in terms of whether it was Patti Smith or John Lennon. There was no question at the time, or even David Bowie. I mean, they are in a position of power and authority and privilege. And so they do not have to think about these questions that the students are bringing up. And that to me is really one of the critical elements that that we should be looking at.
Right, Paisley brought that up.
And so I think that's why you always have to err on the side of, I mean, when you're in the privileged position, you err on the side of keeping your mouth shut, right? And aligning yourself with people who know better than you do. And oftentimes, as a faculty member, that's your students, right? So, I mean, this came up in the same class that I was just talking about earlier that I taught at PCC, because we raised the question of like, am I allowed to even read a passage from Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huck Finn or Claudia Rankine's Citizen when they use the N-word, and I'm in an educational setting? Am I even allowed to read it verbatim from the text in a classroom setting if it includes the N-word? And my answer was no, I am not. Period.
I have to leave early, but I also wanted to just mention what I feel like is the difference between appropriation and appreciation. For instance, there is a song by an artist named Party Next Door, who was under Drake's label. They have a song called Loyal, and they actually had Bad Bunny, who was a Hispanic Latin artist, that is featured on the song. Why I feel like this is appreciation versus appropriation is because they didn't just say, okay, we're gonna speak Spanish on our song. They said, we're gonna take an actual Hispanic Latin artist, put him on the song because he was an up and coming artist and was still gaining traction during that time, and said, you know, take this verse, or we're gonna put you on the song and you do whatever you want to, whether it's speaking English or speaking Spanish. So that gave Bad Bunny a platform within his community to reach out and rap speaking his native tongue, and also as an outreach to the Black community to say, you know, this is like inclusive. We're not gonna leave anybody out. We're not gonna take someone's language and we say it ourselves, because the artists Party Next Door and Drake, they don't speak Spanish. So they took someone who actually does speak it and let them get on the track, versus Justin Bieber, who just said, someone write me a Spanish verse that I can't even speak, and I'm gonna say it and gain monetary or monetization off of it. That was complete appropriation. If you don't speak that language, if that's not your native tongue, don't do it. Just grab an actual artist who is upcoming or gaining traction and have them get on your song, so that, you know, you can cross both communities. So you're, you know, kind of sharing the culture.
I know you have to leave, but I do have a question about this, because Drake has been on a Spanish record speaking Spanish, and so has Usher. They were both featured on a Bachata record with Romeo, where they were speaking Spanish. It's not their native tongue. So I guess, like, do we treat them the same way, or ask the same questions of them if they're on Spanish records?
We definitely do. And that's why I said that's not Drake's song. It's Party Next Door, but Drake, he's under Drake's label, but it's the same thing. Drake is not Spanish. He's not Latino. He's not anything. And same with Usher. If you do not speak that language, even when Beyonce did it, like, she said she took the time to, you know, learn the language and speak it well. But I feel like whenever you have someone featured on your songs or anything, and you're speaking a different language, you need to just bring in an artist that does that. So I would never say, oh no, it's okay that Drake did it, or it's okay that Usher did it. No, same thing. They shouldn't have done it. It's appropriation all the way.
I am so appreciative to everyone staying. I know we're way over time. I still want to get to Patrick because he's the last presentation. Is that right? And, you know, my hope and my dream in starting the honors program and being one of the people that brought it to Woodbury was that this is the exact kind of climate that we create with these amazing student ideas and presentations. And so I thank everyone for their participation and staying. And should we move to Patrick? Okay, great.
Okay, great. Let me share my screen. So to add to our cultural vultures, again, we have your infamous Katy Perry. So I did this through a paper format, and I titled this "The Insatiable Nature of Katy Perry's Dark Horse," which I think is very fitting for her role being kind of the queen of pop music in the early 90s and moving on into kind of tapping to millennials. So I think this video is really interesting to look at. If you guys didn't know, Dark Horse came out around 2013, and it was really an interesting video. I think right off the bat, you could kind of tell everything from the visuals to kind of the tantalizing music that this was going to be another hit for Katy Perry right off the bat. And it was eventually. It won a Grammy, it won AMA Single of 2014. And I think that kind of just shows kind of Katy Perry's effectiveness at really leveraging other cultures in order to gain more culture capital for her and her kind of pop empire. And so in this paper, I was essentially looking at kind of the various ways she's doing this. She's doing this through Orientalism. So this idea of kind of the East and West relationship. There's also a lot of cultural appropriation in kind of the way she views men of color in this video, especially since she is one that has a lot of power as a Westerner in this context in the music video. And I think those kind of two ideas are really played out and kind of lay this fertile ground for exploring these ideas in Dark Horse. So in this article I was looking at by The Guardian, he was looking at Katy Perry's cultural insensitivity, which I think in his quotes was saying is less significant the end result of using cultural stereotypes, which ultimately becomes this kind of breeding ground for racism and kind of this whole thing that pop culture does where a lot of cultures, especially in this case, Egyptian culture and Arab culture is really being utilized to really fuel the success of Katy Perry's music video. So in the beginning of the music video, you kind of see Katy Perry. She's really kind of this sexualized, westernized figure. And all these men are actually courting for her attention. So each one by one, they actually present her like an item. One of them was actually like a huge bowl of Cheetos, hot Cheetos, which is kind of a reference to the hot Cheetos costume she wore back in the day. But ultimately, I think the through line with all these interactions with the men of color and Katy Perry is kind of how kind of white supremacy can kind of engage itself in positions of power where Westerners are actually levying all that power onto people of color. And so in this case, Katy Perry is actually dissatisfied with all the things that these men are giving to her. Like with the hot Cheetos, it was too spicy. So she got really furious and she essentially reduced the man into an object. And one of them, she reduced it to a grill that she actually wore in her mouth. So I think the idea here is that she's actually reducing them to actually objects of affection and objects, like mere objects. I think that points to this idea of kind of Eastern culture and then Western culture, kind of this Westernization of cultures on the East, where they're using it for a lot of capital and gain for their own. With that being said, I think she also reifies this idea of an Orientalist attitude towards a lot of these people. In one of the scenes, she turns a Black man into kind of a pair of fuzzy dice that's hanging from the carriage. So she does a lot of these things where it's really problematic. And I think the context, upon first glance, you might not think it's nothing, especially since her audience is predominantly millennials and Gen Z who are just kind of taking this at face value. So I think there's always more that meets the eye when you actually look at what the actions that Katy Perry is doing in this actual video. The video is actually set in Memphis, Egypt, which is actually a real place, surprisingly. And in here, there was actually a really great article that I found from Time magazine where they were interviewing the video director, Matthew Cullen. And basically in the interview, in his quotes, he said, Katy Perry wants to do something Egyptian and I wanted to combine that with Memphis hip hop. And I think kind of his statement there is quite problematic. And I think the way he is going about kind of using these other cultures in a way that he thinks isn't problematic at all is really kind of the issue here. In that article, surprisingly, they actually bring up an Egyptian kind of professor who was looking at kind of the cultural accuracy of the video. So everything from the hieroglyphics to the actual poses that they were doing. And to some degree, there was some accuracy there, but I think at the same time, what we're really getting at here is kind of the economic exploitation of these cultures and doing it through cultural disrespect. That is ultimately what Katy Perry is really successful at doing. But I think at the end of the day, as consumers, that we're actually watching these videos, we do have power to kind of say that these people are actually doing the wrong things, right? So there's this activist, his name is Shahid. Back in 2014, he actually called the video blasphemy and actually amassed more than 65,000 signatures for a petition to actually remove the name of Allah from the video that was actually towards the end. If you didn't know, Allah is kind of the symbol of God in Islam. And so they're putting a lot of pressure on Katy Perry as a public figure that she actually should recognize that this is blasphemy and this is really just not right and problematic on a lot of levels. And eventually they actually re-uploaded the video with that kind of obscured. So I think, you know, as consumers who are actually consuming this content, I think we do have a say in how they are putting this out. But at the same time, Katy Perry will always continue to do this regardless. She created her own pop culture empire on this. So yeah, that's kind of what I was exploring with Katy Perry, another culture vulture that we explored in this class.
Yay! Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick.
May I
So
ask
does
a
it-
question?
Yes.
Sorry, you're about to ask, like, I'm just going to ask. Number one, would you be willing to share your paper, like, just for private use? I'd love to read this paper. Like,
Yeah,
I'd love
yeah.
to see a paper. I'm a librarian.
Yeah, I could definitely upload it to Google Drive and I'll send you a link. Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you. Secondly, I'm curious about something. So as a Memphis hip hop fan, you know what I mean? Like, I remember when this video came out, and Juicy J has been somebody I've been listening to for a very long time. Not a man known for his enlightened attitude towards women, at least not in his lyrics, but, you know, a venerable figure in hip hop, you know what I mean? Already a complicated figure. But like, when I saw this, I immediately thought of some other examples. Like Ashnikko and Young Baby Tate, and, you know, there are various examples of folks who are like, why did this person of color participate in this particular project that is so problematic, that's so messed up? And some friends of mine are like, they're very much black man, get your money, you know what I mean? They're like, it doesn't matter, it's a chance for them to get put on, like, get it, like, get the paycheck, get it done, like, doesn't matter, this isn't going to affect your career, you know what I mean? And other people who are like, well, no, you're sending a message out, you're legitimizing this by participating in it, you know what I mean? Like, do you have any thoughts on that kind of thing, that, you know, a person of color, you know, participated in this project, you know, was featured not just in the song, but in the video?
Yeah, so Juicy J kind of doesn't make an appearance like later on in the music video, like physically, and then in the lyrics, he's kind of hinted in the beginning and then comes in with his own lines. And I do think the way Katy Perry used Juicy J in this context is kind of to bring in that Memphis hip hop that was added into this kind of chorus of the music that we kind of see throughout. And I think to some degree, I think she could use that as a shield in a way to kind of protect her from criticism that, like, hey, I actually had a person of color, a black guy actually being featured, so I'm actually doing my part, you know, as a white person to actually give a voice. But I think then that becomes problematic because she's using kind of his identity to shield any subsistent criticism that she could have, that people have towards her. And I think then that also makes Juicy J kind of complicit, not speaking out on behalf of his own self.
Does anyone else have any other comments or questions?
I'd like to also comment that your hair is great, Patrick.
Thanks.
I said this in the chat, but I love that you quoted Edward Said, because I was thinking about him when Ayana did her initial presentation and she was talking about Orientalism. So that was a great resource that you used. I'm actually Arab, and I'm sure I probably have seen this video, but I didn't even think twice about it. I don't know, maybe we've all just gotten like really immune to people doing this kind of stuff. So thank you for pointing it out, and it was really interesting.
Hey, Patrick. Something that crosses my mind, especially at the end of your paper, about the person who was able to actually get Katy Perry to edit her video and take out some of the things that were particularly egregious and offensive. What part do we play as consumers? I know, yeah, we love Hollaback Girl and we want to just get up and dance, right? How complicit are we if we continue to consume this crap? I mean, are we complicit, and do we just vote with our eyes and our hearts and walk away?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I feel like because Katy Perry's audience it's much more significantly younger. They're like teenage girls, right? Who are actually just looking at this purely through visuals, and anything that's like bright and catching is gonna garner a click at the end of the day. So I think kind of educating younger people in this sense is really effective because they're the ones ultimately really consuming these, not necessarily older people per se that are actually actively watching this. And I think it's more kind of incumbent on kind of maybe their parents or maybe people at school could actually like teach them a thing or two about like why this is actually problematic on a variety of levels would be really useful.
The push and pull here is fascinating to me, like across all of y'all's presentations, and again, as a newcomer to Los Angeles, and a person of a certain age, it's fascinating to me. I grew up with a band called the Smiths and a guy called Morrissey. I saw a lot of hands go up. We loved this dude, and he actually seemed on the forefront of inclusion and human rights to us, or at least that's the way I felt. You know what I mean? Like, it just was a wonderful man who was bringing everybody into the fold, and he has a huge following among Latinx folks, like here in Los Angeles for sure. And he said a lot of wild shit. Like he said a lot of stuff about immigrants and some racial stuff where everybody is just like, what is Morrissey, like what happened to Morrissey, like what is he talking about? And yet he has this diehard contingent of Chicano and Chicana, I don't know if Chicanx is actually a word like Latinx, but Chicana fans here in Los Angeles, and a lot of times they're like, yeah, I know, like I don't know what to tell you, like it's ridiculous some of the shit he said, but I love him and I love his music and I won't stop. You know what I mean? Like this push and pull is fascinating to me, of like where we're like, Hollaback Girl is a problem, you know what I mean? But it's also a slap. Like, how do we deal with that? That wasn't a question, sorry. Like,
I mean, Solomon, I grapple a lot with this, and I like what Randy said, because he was like, okay, let's call it what it is. There's power games and there's power structures. And so if these artists are in the position, like, Morrison is in the position of changing lives. And if he should be saying these insensitive and racist things, xenophobic and so forth, I mean, you can look it up, it's horrendous. Then he's basically misusing his power. And that's blatant. And so I think it's fun. Artists should engage in dangerous discourse, and they should risk, crossing thresholds and breaking people's hearts in every way. But I think that self-awareness is essential, and I think we're getting better at it, and getting better at calling it out. Thank you for all three students for calling. I mean, this is basically hopefully a systematic behavior. We're beginning to be more enlightened about responsibility.
I saw Patti Smith open for Morrissey a few years ago. So I think sometimes artists check other artists too. When Carla was saying, like, what can we do? Because I know, for example, Roger Waters always calls out artists who perform in Israel and brings awareness to that issue and stuff. So that's another way, I think. But he must not have been saying too many crazy things before that concert happened. Or Patty might have spit on him or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's been more recent. But that's wild, right? Like, I'm not going to tell like a Mexican friend of mine, you shouldn't be listening to Morrissey. You know what I mean? Like, I have gay friends who eat at Chick-fil-A. They love Chick-fil-A. Like, they're like, what do I care? I'm going to eat at Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, I can't eat at Chick-fil-A. Like, I've been in a car with a gay friend who's like, let's go eat Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, I'm not supposed to eat at Chick-fil-A. Like,
I think sometimes it's okay to separate the artist from the music, because sometimes music is like the soundtrack of our youth, and it's hard to separate. But for example, I like Michael Jackson, and it's really hard to listen to Michael Jackson songs now. And, you know, my whole philosophy about separating the artist from the music, I think there are lines that every individual has to like draw for themselves. And so I don't know.
I agree with you. I agree with Rita, because I had no idea that Morrissey had said things, or, you know, because I love his music, but I had no idea. I wasn't following what he was saying. I just saw the music on the radio when I was listening to it. I had no idea I was following. I still haven't read anything that he has said about it. I don't care about what he says. I just like the rhythm of the music. So, and to also separate the artist from the art. With Woody Allen, you know, you like the movies, but you don't like maybe the person that he is. But you like the movies that he made.
I feel like you were cutting out a little bit there, Arthur, but I think I agreed with everything you said. You know, and it's obviously not just music either, right? Like, I feel like I can't buy Goya now, and I never bought a My Pillow, but they're out too, and it's just, it's harder and harder to be a consumer. But I think that goes to what Carla was saying, like, one of these, everybody has a line, and maybe if, I don't know, I guess they'll have to feel it in their pocketbooks at some point if they offend too many people.
That's how we vote, right? Also,
Yeah.
interesting that you bring up Michael Jackson, because like Patrick, you know, was talking about the Dark Horse video, and I remember when that first came out, it reminded me very much of a Michael Jackson video from my teenage years called "Remember the Time," that had Eddie Murphy and Amani in it. But anyway.
Okay.
Y'all have been very patient hosts, and the students have been very patient too. Thank y'all all.
I mean, I feel like some of these questions are age-old questions, right? I mean, like Leni Riefenstahl, The Triumph of the Will. Do we study her in film studies departments because that's such, you know, an arguably aesthetically brilliant film, or do we dismiss her and you know, completely because it was absolutely reprehensible on a moral level? I mean, you know, we've been talking about this for a long time.
A good friend of mine is an animation professor at UCLA, and like she's dedicated this semester to questions of Black representation in early American animation. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not mysterious looking at, you know, these Mickey Mouse like with the white gloves and the black skin, like where this came from, right? And it's like, how do we deal with this?
You've got Bugs Bunny in blackface. Yeah. Yeah, we got.
I mean, I'm so happy that, you know, you taught this class, Ayana, and this is just such, I know it's a small slice of probably what the entire course was about, but it's representative of exactly what I was hoping for the honors program, and I am not gonna spend any of our valuable time at 6:50 at night belaboring the honors program. It is a program that's available to any student on campus to take these courses. You do not have to be part of the program in order to enroll in these courses. But if you have enrolled in a course already, and I'm speaking to those students, those 3 students in front of me, or no, because yeah, Paisley left, but yeah, but it's 3 courses, that's it. And then a few other requirements. But if you would like more information, just email me and I'll send it to you, rather than take more time tonight. But thank you so much, all of you on my screen right now, for staying almost double the time. Obviously, this was an important conversation. and I'm thrilled that we had it. And thank you to the students especially for your ideas and just, you know, the challenge that you represent, which is incredibly important. Thank you, Ayana.
Thank you. This was wonderful. This was a great discussion. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
So take care. Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you so much.